happy little games. This video was a special Patreon request from Wasteland Warrior in Cleveland, Ohio. If you would like to request a video, be sure to sign up for my Patreon at the link below. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Just take a look at Peter Griffin and Homer Simpson, Doc Brown and Marty McFly and Rick and Morty, Deadpool and Deathstroke, and finally SpongeBob and Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island. When it comes to video games, companies have been lifting ideas from each other almost since the beginning. Spies from Capcom and Konami, for example, would hang out in arcades to see what newest games were on test from the other companies. If they spotted something unique and good, they would rush back to their bosses and attempt to develop an imitation and get it to market as quickly as possible. Oftentimes, this would be done even before the original game that was on test was released. Today, we are going to take a look at a little scene arcade game which took inspiration from another popular arcade title at the time by the name of 64th Street. I never saw this game back in the day, since the only 64th Street I knew of was where to get some blow on a hoe, so to say I was disappointed when I finally got to play it was an understatement. What major arcade game was the inspiration for this game? What successful video game was spawned from this game? Let's find out as we learn about the history of 64th Street, a detective story by Jaleco. The year is 1990 and Capcom's Final Fight is a roaring success in the arcades. Soon thereafter, a number of imitators would bring to market their own version of the game, and Jaleco was no different. Japan Leisure Co. had been around since 1974 and started producing arcade games in 1982. Upon entering the arcade market, they shortened their name to Jaleco and started producing a number of hits over the next 30 years. Some of the ones on offer were Wasteland, Saint Dragon, Cisco Heat, and Bases Loaded for the NES. As I mentioned, Final Fight was a massive success for arcade giant Capcom, and Jaleco wanted to produce something as close to it as possible, but with its own distinctive spin on the genre. Rather than set the game in modern times or even the future, they decided to go all the way back to 1939. This provided a unique storyline and aesthetic that hadn't been seen in a brawler before. It's amazing how close to the original game they decided to keep things, from the opening cinematic, which definitely has a Final Fight feel, to some of the enemies and bosses you face throughout the game. They wanted to maintain the two-player co-op mode and large detailed sprites. They also wanted to make sure the game was pick up and play without being overly complicated. To flesh out the story, they added text-only cutscenes between each level, letting you know what's going on. 64th Street, a detective story, was released by Jaleco in 1991. As the story goes, you take on the role of seasoned detective Rick Anderson, who just so happens to look like a young version of J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man, and his young protege Alan, who has a short temper and gets very violent when angry, similar to Bruce Banner. Late one night, a man comes into the office looking to hire Rick and Alan to look for his kidnapped daughter. The kidnappers left a note for the victim's father, which he gives to Rick and Alan. Sometime later, Rick discovers an encoded message in the classifieds which was actually a secret code only understood by the other crime families. They use this information along with their fists of fury to track down the kidnappers, rescue the girl, and save the day. Once again, it's very similar to rescuing Jessica in Final Fight, but the unique aspect about it being set in 1939 sets it apart from other similar brawlers. You take your pick of either Rick or Alan, both of whom have different traits. Rick is strong but slow, similar to Hagar in Final Fight, and Alan is faster but weaker, similar to Cody. The controls are pretty straightforward with an attack button and a jump button. Along with their standard individual moves, each person has a special move which depletes your life bar every time you use it. One cool aspect is the ability to grab your enemy and throw them into the background, doing property damage in the process. Doing this will potentially uncover food or cats who were hidden in the walls that you can rescue for points. This was later ripped off by Konami in the game Batman Returns for the Super Nintendo. Another cool feature is the addition of double team moves, which sees you perform a few different attacks with your buddy. You have to watch out though, because friendly fire can see you damage and ultimately kill your partner if you're not careful. At various points throughout the game are the obligatory tires, boxes, and saves that will sometimes contain food or weapons. The weapons you can pick up are a lead pipe which has a long reach but it is slow, or a wrench which is faster but obviously not as long.
That's what she said.
There are 6 stages in the game, broken up into smaller sections in each one. At the end of each stage is a mini-boss. The stages you encounter are 64th Street, Smuggler's Wharf, Train Yard, Secret Factory, The Headquarters, and the last level, which is titled The Last Level, takes place on a giant blimp. The bosses are about as varied as you can get, with some more blatant ripoffs from Final Fight. The first boss you encounter looks very similar to Damned, the first boss in Final Fight. Then it's on to Peg Leg Pete. Then we have to take on 2 twin wrestlers, which again is very similar to taking on the Adori twins in Final Fight. A giant robot man who was inspired by the Fritz Lang classic Metropolis. A kabuki warrior, and finally, the head of the Legacy organization. After you defeat the boss, you rescue the girl and steal the blimp in the process, heading out into the sunset to solve another case. After the credits roll, your score is shown and you can enter your initials, which tells you exactly how perfect you did. The graphics are nice with large detailed sprites, which complements the 1939 setting. The music is great with, again, appropriate 1930s era jazz tunes playing in the background. The sound effects are large and in charge with plenty of bone-crunching grunts and groans to go around. The controls are good with nice tight movement over your character. The game is fun to play, although similar to any other brawler in existence, it's always more fun to play with 2 players. The game did not receive any home conversions as it came and went like a fart in the wind. We never got this in my arcade back in the day, but after playing through it for this video, I'm sorry I missed it. The game itself was not that big of a hit when it was released, but has since developed a cult following. Jaleco kept plugging away when it came to their various video game titles, and 64th Street actually inspired the trilogy of games for the Super Famicom by the name of Rushing Beat in Japan, or Rival Turf for the Super Nintendo here in America. These were 2-player brawlers very much in the same vein as 64th Street, but polished just a little bit more. If you would like me to cover these games, let me know in the comments down below. Although Rick and Alan would not be featured in any future games, they did make a cameo in the Jaleco arcade game Chimera Beast. They are really small and tiny, but as you can see, that's definitely Rick and Alan. The game was released for iOS in 2011 and it's really well done. There are some more bells and whistles when it comes to the game. There are 2 game modes available, including a story mode and a survival mode, with you having just 5 lives to complete the entire game. The arcade game has been emulated perfectly here and it looks and sounds great. The game was also released as part of the Arcade Archives on PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. 64th Street, a detective story, was one of those games I never got to see in the arcades. Sure, it's a bit rough around the edges, especially when compared to Final Fight or other more polished brawlers, but it's still a fun game to play. It did introduce at least one innovation, specifically where you can slam your opponents into the wall doing property damage. If you've never been to 64th Street and you're definitely not looking for some blow in a hole, be sure and give this game a shot. You'll be glad you did. If you enjoyed this video or any of my content, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. Thanks everybody for watching.